So I started off with this topic of digital and humans and technology, and I wasn't sure how to approach it. And so I hit this point of, what is this digital vastness? How do we approach this digital vastness? And I started off by drawing things by hand, which are for good reason. By the end, it'll become a little more apparent why I did this. And so I see this digital vastness as a collection of us, our experiences, our interactions, our information, all these things, all your bad photos from Friday night. And so in a slightly male office apparel centric view, we have people who like ties, bow ties, and no ties, able to communicate with one another. Now, while we're able to communicate with one another, we have this thing called technology in between us. And so what technology, I often hear that it's the bane of our existence. It's, oh, people don't know how to read anymore because of technology, or, oh, you don't take photos of all your meals? And so we blame this thing so often for our woes, but I would say it's a little bit more two-way. And one thing that often happens is we like these new shiny objects, we stare at them, they're glorious and they entertain us, and we think that these old things are now dead to us. So as everyone knows, because photography came around, painting is now dead. So for the last 50 years or so, no paintings have been made. And so this is where I start to see this idea of we pass these things over and we think they're dead to us, but they stick around somehow. Things like our old little phones, and yes, you don't have cell phones with the big giant handle, but you see it come around every so often. You can get an attachment now. And that's because there's some affordances in this. We built this because it has this handy handle and we have a sense of how to use it. And so over time, these things evolve and they change because we have changing needs. And so we have engineers, scientists, tie and no tie people who are all feeding this need, as well as actually solving these needs, actually fulfilling these needs for new technology, for new things that we want. And so this is where I'm going to bring up Tinder. And for those who aren't familiar with Tinder, it's an app in which you get to, based on photos, select if you do or don't want to interact with someone. And so this can be, I see this as speaking to our humanness and our interactions with technology, because over the course of a day, you'll look at thousands of people, and consciously or unconsciously, you will consider them in one way or another. And Tinder is just making that more efficient. It's just giving you an opportunity to be like, yes, I want to interact with you, or no, I don't want to interact with you. And as I'm sure some of you have already started thinking, he's wearing a bow tie, nope, I'm not interested, and that's okay, we wouldn't talk anyways. So, stepping forward from Tinder, what Tinder also lets us do is it lets us extend our abilities. So in this McLuhan-esque sense, it extends our ability to interact with one another, because we're not only just looking at each other and considering, I think I might want to talk to them. It's now, yes, I want to talk to them, and it allows us, it gives us an easier in to be able to actually talk to one another. Now, you'll have to bear with me. This is where I'm going to bring up technology is akin to magic. So there's people who love this magical thing that you glow at, or not glow at, you stare at and it glows in your face and you're like, oh, it's glorious. And then there's others who fear it, who see it as our impending doom. And I think both sides are right. I think they both feed into something that speaks to our interaction with technology. The reason I bring this up is we want to interact with technology because we are the ones on the other side often. We want to interact with each other, our experiences, we want to get a sense of who's there, and we want to spend some time finding out about each other. But in that, you have to be careful. You're feeding that system, you're the one who's influencing that system, and at the end of the day, technology can be our kryptonite. It constrains us, it controls us, it can limit us. And so I'm going to admit, in my biased, lecturer-centric view of the world, I'm going to give you some things to think about while stepping out and further on after this PechaKucha. So, we're going to come back to that vastness. And so technology I see as this vastness of experiences, ideas, so on and so forth. And how do we typically access that? We Google it. And so yes, you Google your answer, you get your answer. Now, Google, of course, tracks what you do. And it tries to feed you better answers in a logical step. But what that starts to do is it starts to limit you. It starts to constrain you in this bubble of information. And so this comes into this idea of we are not technology. We don't think in ones and zeros. We interact and we experience the world much differently than our technology does. There are patterns to how we experience the world, but at the same time, these are not how our technology does. You enjoyed that meal, your camera just saved the pixels for you. And so, another constraint that we end up with is the interactions or the interfaces that we actually use. Things like your finger are not that precise. You try and tap a screen, although it's a very direct interaction with that screen, you won't be able to select one little pixel on that screen. And that's where we have this mouse. Instead, we can select a single pixel, but at the same time, it's not a direct interaction. We have this little hand thing, and then you have to figure out where it's on the screen. And so we come back to power and control. And so tech can go both ways, and I'm going to bring up Facebook, poor Facebook, because Facebook did one thing that I think exemplifies this very recently. They ran a study in which they influenced people's feeds, and they saw a very strong emotional response by influencing these feeds. And I think this speaks very much to this two-way relationship. We feed the system, we give it information, it reacts, and then we respond, and we rinse and repeat. And so in this Facebook example, we have these people who fed in information, and they got out something that they weren't expecting. It's a little bit more complex than that, but bear with me. So I bring it back to unicorns, and I apologize, this is something that I rant about, where in my field we have unicorns are these rare mythical beings who can design and code at the same time. And I see this a little bit more broadly. In your own experience, in your own lives, you want to be able to understand what it is to be human and understand the technology you work with. Because if you don't understand that, it starts to control you. And you want to be the ones who, at least to an extent, understand what you're feeding into that system, what that interaction is actually doing and how the result is affecting you. Because if you're just letting the system run you unknowingly, it becomes a concern. You want to be careful about what you let it run or how you let it control you. And so I bring it back to this grand scheme of the digital vastness, understanding your technology, understanding at least to an extent how it influences you, your input, helps you go on meaningful treks into the vastness. And I think that's it for me. Thank you.